On freshman move-in day, a fragile-looking scholarship student stood at the entrance of the dorm, begging my son to carry her massive, worn-out suitcase up to her sixth-floor room. In my past life, I had raised my son to be a gentleman, to always lend a hand to those in need. So I smiled and told him to go help her out. But the moment he set that suitcase down in her room, she ran straight to the office of student affairs. Carefully, she accused my son of cornering her in a blind spot in the fire escape and attempting to assault her. By the time the university's disciplinary notice went public, Connor's status as the state's top academic recruit had become a national punchline. The cyberbullying was relentless, a toxic tide of public humiliation and death threats. Unable to withstand the crushing weight of the slander, my son jumped from the roof of the science hall. My husband, Richard, aged a lifetime overnight and died in a head-on collision, on his way to hold the university administration accountable. Meanwhile, she, riding the wave of public sympathy as a vulnerable, underprivileged victim, secured a 4-year full-ride scholarship and was fast-tracked into a prestigious graduate program. During her speech as the student representative at the alumni gala, she looked directly down at my tear-stained face in the crowd, offering a soft, mocking smile. Some pain is just a stepping stone on the path of growth, isn't it, Mrs. Bradshaw? In this life? Back on that sweltering August afternoon, Hannah Webb stood by her massive trunk, her eyes already rimming with tears. Ma'am, it's just so heavy, and I'm all on my own. Do you think the handsome sophomore could please help me out? I held Connor's hand tight, my face completely devoid of warmth. Oh, the luggage. You can pay one of the campus security guards $50 to handle that. Hannah froze. I clearly hadn't expected such a blunt refusal. Ma'am, her voice trembled, her lip quivering on cue. My family is poor. Once I paid my tuition, I barely had enough left for food. $50 is a week's worth of groceries for me. She raised her hand, brushing away a tear that rolled perfectly down her cheek. I didn't mean to be a bother, but I really am all alone. Her soft, carrying voice had an incredible carrying power. Within seconds, a small crowd of students and parents began to gather, drawing closer to see the commotion. A young man wearing a designer polo shirt stepped forward. His brows furrowed as he glared at me. Ma'am, isn't that incredibly cold? We're all classmates here. What's wrong with a guy helping a girl with her bags? An older woman nearby immediately chimed in. Exactly. Look how upset the poor girl is. You people dress so nicely, yet you don't seem to have a single shred of empathy. Rich people these days, someone else muttered from the crowd, completely selfish. The murmurs of disapproval grew louder. Hannah kept her head low, her shoulders shaking with timed, delicate sobs. Connor took a step forward, his mouth opening to explain, but I raised my hand, stopping him in his tracks. I turned my gaze directly to the young man in the designer shirt. You think she's pitiful? I asked, my voice calm and clear. The boy puffed out his chest. Of course. Helping the vulnerable is basic human decency. I nodded slowly. Great. Then you carry her suitcase up to the 6th floor. He blinked. Looking down at the massive, taped-up trunk, his expression faltered, a flush rising to his cheeks. I just finished playing basketball. My wrist is strained. Besides, she asked her son, not me. I smiled a cold, thin expression and turned my eyes to the older woman who had spoken up. Since your empathy is overflowing, why don't you pay the $50 to hire the campus security guard? $50 to buy yourself the reputation of a saint? What a bargain. The woman's face stiffened. She took a step back into the crowd, her voice turning defensive. Are you crazy? Why on earth would I spend my money on a stranger? The crowd fell silent. I looked back down at Hannah. Hear that? Everyone has plenty of pity to spare, but no one wants to lift a finger or spend a dime. Hannah's face shifted, through shades of pale and red. Ma'am, why are you humiliating me like this? Is it just because I'm poor? I stepped closer, staring into her eyes, making sure she heard every single word. Does being poor make you automatically right? Does being poor mean the world owes you a free pass? Does being poor mean you have the right to hijack other people's time and physical labor for free? My son is a national merit scholar, not your unpaid labor. Connor, let's go. I took Connor's hand and turned away, leaving the whispers behind. Once we had walked a safe distance from the freshman dorms, Connor asked in a quiet, hesitant voice, Mom, was that really okay? She is going to be my classmate after all. I stopped and looked at my son, the gentle, brilliant boy who in another life had been driven to jump from a building. Remember this, Connor? Never hand out your sympathy blindly. Some people will use your kindness as a weapon against you. He didn't fully understand, but he nodded anyway. Okay, I trust you. By 3 in the afternoon, Connor and I had settled into our rooms at the hotel just off campus. Suddenly, Connor's phone buzzed. The caller ID showed Director Collins, the freshman academic advisor. When Connor answered, Collins's voice came through the speaker, low, tight, and dripping with authority. Connor Bradshaw, get down to the student affairs office immediately and bring your parents. I sat quietly on the sofa, taking a slow sip of my tea. It was starting. Connor frowned. Director Collins, did something happen? Did something happen? You have the nerve to ask me that? Collins let out a harsh, cold laugh. Hannah Webb is sitting in my office, crying her eyes out. He claims that around 1:30 today you cornered her in the fire escape on the north side of the library and tried to assault her. Connor bolted upright, his face draining of color. That's impossible. I've been with my mother at the hotel all afternoon. I don't even know where the library is. Save your yelling for someone else. The girl's shirt is torn open and her neck is covered in scratches. Collins's tone was sharp and unyielding. This is an extremely serious offense. Get over here right now. If this isn't resolved, you can forget about attending this university. The line went dead. Connor stared at his shaking hands, his voice trembling. She's insane. We didn't even help her with her bags. How can she just make this up? I set my teacup down, my eyes hardening. In my past life, she had used the bag-moving incident as her pretext to lure him into a quiet area. In this life, I had denied her that pretext. Yet she had simply fabricated a scene in the library fire escape. Anyway, she was determined to destroy him. Don't be afraid, I said, standing up and grabbing my purse. Let's go. Let's see what she has to say. When we pushed open the heavy door of the student affairs office, the only sound was the muffled, ragged sobbing of a young girl. Hannah was curled up on the small leather sofa, her shirt collar torn open, exposing her bare shoulder. Director Collins sat behind his desk, his face grim. The moment we walked in, Hannah's sobbing intensified. She shrank back, pointing a trembling finger at Connor. Don't let him near me, please. Please don't let him near me. Connor's eyes flared with anger. Hannah, what lies are you telling? I haven't even stepped foot near the library today. Collins slammed his hand onto the desk. Connor, you dare threaten the victim in my office. I stepped forward, moving Connor behind me. Director Collins, is it? The police haven't even been called, and no investigation has taken place. Isn't it a bit premature to call her the victim? Collins glared at me. Are you Connor's mother? I am. Then I have to ask how you've been raising your son, a National Merit Scholar. What's the use of high test scores if he's morally bankrupt? Collins pointed a finger at Hannah. This girl just arrived from a small rural town. She is completely innocent. Now she's been traumatized by your son. How is she supposed to face anyone on this campus? I pulled over a chair and sat down calmly. Director Collins, since you are so certain my son is responsible, where is the evidence? Collins let out a mocking scoff. Evidence. Look at the marks on her body. Her clothes are torn to shreds. Do you think she did that to herself? Why couldn't she have? I countered. Collins choked on his words, his face flushing with fury. What kind of attitude is that? Is this how you parent defending a predator? No wonder he turned out like this. Before he could continue, the office door was flung open. My husband, Richard, burst into the room panting and covered in sweat. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't even look at me. He marched straight to Connor and delivered a stinging slap across his face. The sound cracked through the quiet office. Connor's head jerked to the side, his cheek blooming bright red. Dad, whispered, clutching his face in utter shock. Don't call me Dad. I don't have a son who does disgusting things like this, Richard roared, his fingers shaking in Connor's face. I sent you to college to get an education, not to act like a common criminal. You've ruined my name. After venting his rage, Richard turned to Collins, his posture instantly collapsing into a subservient, fawning slouch. Director Collins, I am so incredibly sorry. This is my failure as a father. Collins's expression softened slightly. Mr. Bradshaw, at least you are reasonable. This incident is highly damaging to the university's reputation. If we involve the police, Connor's entire future will be ruined. Hearing the word police, Richard's knees nearly buckled. He waved his hands frantically. No, please don't call the police. We have money. We can settle this financially. Collins sighed, putting on a show of deep reluctance considering Connor's academic record. I don't want to destroy his life either. Let's see what Hannah wants. He looked over at the sofa. Hannah, you've been deeply wronged. But a police investigation would also drag your name through the mud. If Connor offers a formal apology and some financial compensation. Hannah raised her tear-stained face, her voice barely a whisper. Director Collins, I don't want their money. This isn't about money. She bit her lip, looking the picture of humiliated Grace. I just don't think it's fair. How can someone with such terrible character represent the freshman class at convocation? How can he be awarded the Presidential Merit Scholarship? There it was. That was her real target. Richard, relieved that the problem could be solved without the police, glared at Connor. What are you waiting for? Go over there and apologize. Apologize to her. We don't need the scholarship. And you'll hand over the speaking slot to her right now. He reached out, trying to grab Connor's neck to force him to bow. Do it. Settle this now before it hurts my business. I stood up, grabbed Richard's wrist, and shoved him back with all my strength. Richard stumbled, looking at me in shock. Grace, are you out of your mind? I looked at this weak, selfish man with nothing but cold disgust. My son didn't do this. Why should he apologize? Why should he give up his scholarship? Are you trying to send our son to prison? Richard hissed, leaning in close. Are you trying to make me a laughingstock among my business associates? I ignored him entirely. I walked over to Hannah, standing directly in front of her. Hannah, you are absolutely certain it was my son, Connor Bradshaw, who tried to assault you in the library's north fire escape. Hannah shrank back, her eyes darting around. Yes. What exact time? I pressed, stepping closer. Around 1:30 today. What was he wearing? A white t-shirt and black athletic shorts. She described his clothes with perfect accuracy. Were there any witnesses in the stairwell? No. No one ever uses that stairwell, and the security cameras there are broken. The moment the words left her mouth, she seemed to realize she had said too much. She quickly covered her face and began to sob hysterically again. Ma'am, please stop interrogating me. I'm so scared. Collins bolted from his chair. Grace, that is enough. You are actively re-traumatizing the victim. He pointed toward the door. My decision is final. Connor will issue a public apology, forfeit his scholarship and speaking slot, and be placed on disciplinary probation. If you refuse to accept these terms, I will escalate this to the administration for immediate expulsion. Richard was practically hyperventilating, pulling up my sleeve. Grace, shut up. Director Collins is being incredibly generous. What more do you want? I looked at Collins, studying his self-righteous face. Director Collins, if the security cameras are broken, how can you condemn my son based solely on her word? Because why would any young woman lie about something like this? Collins said, his voice dripping with moral superiority. Women are inherently vulnerable in these situations. She is clearly traumatized. Why would she make it up? I nodded slowly, reaching into my purse and pulling out my phone. Fine. Since the university is incapable of finding the truth, we'll let the professionals handle it. I tapped the screen. I'm calling the police. Hannah's crying stopped for half a second. It was tiny, almost imperceptible, but I saw it. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the sofa, and the color drained from her face. Richard immediately grabbed my arm. Grace, don't. I pulled away. Why not? His mouth opened, but no answer came. I looked at Director Collins. If my son is guilty, an investigation will prove it. If he's innocent, an investigation will clear him. Either way, that's what we should want. Collins's expression hardened. This is a university disciplinary matter. No. I smiled. An accusation of attempted sexual assault is a criminal matter. I pressed the call button. Hannah suddenly jumped to her feet. No. Everyone froze. Her eyes widened. She quickly lowered her voice. I mean, please don't call them. I tilted my head. Why? She swallowed. I don't want strangers questioning me. That's unfortunate. I raised the phone again. Hannah rushed forward. Please. There it was. The desperation beneath the performance. I looked at her torn shirt. then at her scratches, then at her perfectly manicured nails. You said my son attacked you at 1:30. Yes. You said you fought him. Hannah nodded. I did. Then you should have his DNA under your fingernails. Her face went rigid. I continued. Your shirt should have his fingerprints. Your skin should have traces of his clothing fibers. There should be something. Collins slammed his palm onto the desk. That is enough. No, Director. I turned toward him. It's only enough when my son is accused? I pulled out my second phone. I already contacted a private investigator the moment you called us. Richard stared at me. You what? I also contacted the hotel manager. Connor looked confused. Mom, I squeezed his shoulder. Remember when we arrived at the hotel? He nodded. You checked in at 2:05, but we weren't sitting around doing nothing before that. I looked at Collins. We stopped at the campus bookstore. His expression changed. The bookstore has cameras. Hannah's lips parted. And we walked directly from there to the hotel. I lifted my phone. The footage has already been secured. Hannah's face turned white. Collins looked at her. For the first time since we entered the room, his certainty disappeared. I smiled. You made one mistake, Hannah. She shook her head rapidly. I don't know what you're talking about. You researched my son before today. Connor frowned. What? I turned to him. She knew exactly what you were wearing. Hannah immediately said, You described it earlier? No. I shook my head. You described the clothes before Director Collins told you what Connor was wearing. Everyone looked at Hannah. She froze. I continued. You claimed you couldn't clearly see him because you were terrified. Yet somehow you remembered the exact color and style of his clothes. Hannah's breathing became uneven. Collins looked uncomfortable. Richard whispered, Grace, but I wasn't finished. You also said the fire escape cameras were broken. Hannah stared at me. How did you know that? Her lips trembled. I saw the sign. There's no sign. I held up my phone. My investigator checked. Hannah took a step backward. There are 2 cameras covering that corridor. Her face collapsed. For a moment, the room was completely still. Then Collins suddenly stood. Everyone needs to calm down. We can investigate this internally. I laughed. Internally? I pointed at him. You were ready to destroy my son's academic career based on one accusation and no investigation. Then I pointed at Hannah. And she was prepared to use that accusation to steal his scholarship, his speaking position, and his reputation. I looked at Richard. And you were ready to sacrifice our son because you were afraid of what your business associates might say. Richard's face reddened. I made a mistake. Yes. I nodded. You did. Connor looked at his father. The hurt in his eyes was worse than anger. Richard lowered his head. I was scared. Connor gave a bitter laugh. You were scared of losing your reputation. Richard had no response. Then the office door opened. 2 police officers walked in. Hannah screamed. No. Everyone turned toward her. One officer calmly said, Miss Webb, we'd like to ask you some questions. She backed into the sofa. I didn't do anything. I smiled. I know. She stared at me. I know you didn't attack Connor. Her eyes widened. But I also know you weren't attacked at all. The police officers exchanged a glance. I continued. You staged everything. Hannah's tears returned. That's a lie. Then let the evidence speak. I handed over my phone. The first file contained the bookstore footage. The second contained hotel footage. The third was something Hannah never expected. A photograph. Taken earlier that afternoon. Hannah stood behind the library with a small pair of scissors in her hand. Beside her was a torn white shirt. Connor's shirt size. The police officer's expression changed. Where did you get this? My investigator. I looked directly at Hannah. She bought that shirt 2 days ago. Hannah's knees buckled. No. She also purchased makeup designed to create bruising. No. And the scratches on her neck? I smiled. Those were made with her own fingernails. Hannah began sobbing hysterically. But this time, nobody rushed to comfort her. The same people who had called my son a predator were now staring at her like she was something poisonous. Then the police found something even better. Messages. Hannah had been communicating with another student. They showed that she had planned the accusation weeks ago. Her goal wasn't merely Connor's scholarship. She wanted his entire future. She wanted the university to declare her the innocent victim and him the disgraced predator. Exactly what had happened in my previous life. Only this time, the trap had snapped shut around the person who built it. As the officers escorted Hannah away, she suddenly twisted around. Her tear-streaked face transformed. The sweet scholarship student disappeared. You think you've won? I smiled. No. I stepped closer. I think you've only started paying. Her eyes burned with hatred. You ruined me. I laughed softly. No, Hannah. I looked at Connor, then back at her. You tried to ruin my son with a lie. I stepped aside as the officers took her through the door. So, I made sure the world saw exactly what you were. 3 days later, the university issued a public statement. Hannah was expelled pending criminal charges. Her scholarship was revoked. The graduate program that had once welcomed her withdrew its offer. Every article that had once praised her as a courageous young survivor now carried the same headline. Scholarship student accused of fabricating assault for academic advantage. Connor's name was cleared. His scholarship was restored. His speaking position was returned. But I wasn't satisfied. Because in my previous life, Hannah hadn't acted alone. Someone had helped her. Someone had made sure the cameras were supposedly broken. Someone had pressured the administration to bury the truth. And when I walked past Director Collins' office that evening, I saw him hurriedly stuffing documents into a briefcase. I stopped outside the door. Then I smiled. The real revenge was just beginning. I waited until Collins left the administration building before following him. He drove across town and stopped outside a private club. I stayed in the car with Richard. A few minutes later, Collins stepped into the underground parking garage. A black sedan was waiting there. A man got out. Richard's expression changed. That's Malcolm Vane. Who? The university trustee who donated the new science building. I watched Malcolm hand Collins a thick envelope. Collins looked around before taking it. Richard's face went pale. I've done business with him before. What kind of business? Richard didn't answer. I looked at him. Richard. He finally sighed. I borrowed money from him. How much? His silence told me enough. How much? 3 million. I stared at him. For what? My business. And you were going to save yourself by letting our son take the fall? I thought the university would settle it quietly. You didn't care whether Connor was innocent. Richard's face tightened. I was going to fix it. No. I shook my head. You were going to protect yourself. He looked away. I didn't say anything else. I already knew what I needed to do. The next morning, I moved every account and asset that belonged to Connor under my control. Richard discovered it before breakfast. Grace, what did you do? I protected our son. You can't just take everything. I can. I placed a folder in front of him. Your business accounts, your debts, your transfers, every payment you've been hiding from me. His hands began to shake as he flipped through the pages. Where did you get these? I know more than you think. He stared at me. Grace, in my last life, I watched you lose everything after Connor died. His face went pale. I watched you blame the university. You blamed Hannah. You blamed everyone. I closed the folder. But you never blamed yourself. Richard couldn't speak. I stood. I'm not letting history repeat itself. Then I walked away. By that afternoon, I had everything I needed. The payments between Richard and Malcolm, the university's financial records, the messages between Collins and Hannah, and most importantly, the evidence proving that Hannah had fabricated the attack. I sent everything to the police and the university board. The reaction was immediate. Collins was suspended. Richard's business accounts were frozen pending investigation. Malcolm's financial dealings were exposed. And Hannah's carefully prepared story began falling apart. But she didn't give up. She went on television. She cried. She talked about being a poor student who had come to the university hoping for a better life. She claimed she had been pressured by powerful people. She claimed she had only made mistakes because she was frightened. The interviewer asked her one question. Why did you accuse Connor Bradshaw if you weren't certain? Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I was afraid. I watched the interview from my living room and laughed. That word had protected her in my previous life. This time, it wasn't going to save her, because I had kept one final piece of evidence. A recording of Hannah talking to another student before the accusation. Her voice was cheerful, confident. She wasn't frightened. She wasn't confused. She was planning exactly what she wanted to happen. Once everyone believes I'm the victim, they'll destroy him for me. The recording went public that evening. The reaction was immediate. The university revoked Hannah's scholarship. Her admission was cancelled. Her graduate program withdrew its offer. Students who had defended her began demanding apologies. The same people who had called Connor a predator were now calling Hannah a liar. Director Collins resigned before the university could fire him. And Hannah? She was arrested for filing a false report and fabricating evidence. When Connor's name was officially cleared, the university offered him his scholarship back and restored his place as freshman representative. At the ceremony, he stood in front of hundreds of students. I watched from the audience as he took the microphone. I don't want anyone to feel sorry for me. The room became quiet. I was accused of something I didn't do. He paused. My family almost lost everything because of a lie. Then he smiled. But the truth came out. The applause was deafening. Connor looked toward me. I'm grateful to my mother for believing me when it would have been easier not to. My eyes stung. Afterward, we walked across campus together. Connor glanced at me. Mom. Yes. You're smiling. I have every reason to. He laughed. You really enjoyed watching her downfall, didn't you? I didn't bother denying it. She tried to destroy my son. Connor shook his head. That's my mother. I slipped my arm through his. Come on, let's go home. As we walked away, I looked back once at the university. In my previous life, I had walked through those same gates carrying flowers for my dead son. This time, I was leaving with him beside me. That was the justice I needed. 6 months later, Hannah Webb was sitting on the floor of a prison laundry room, scrubbing a stain from a uniform. Her hands were raw. Her hair had been cut short. The expensive skincare she once bragged about was gone, as were the pretty clothes, the carefully practiced tears, and the soft voice that had once made an entire university believe her. Webb. A guard slammed a laundry basket onto the table. Those aren't clean. Hannah looked down. They're clean. Then do them again. Her jaw tightened. Once, people had rushed to help whenever she cried. Now, nobody cared. She had tried the same performance in prison. During her first week, she told everyone she was innocent. She told them she had been framed. She told them she had been a poor scholarship student who had been targeted by a wealthy family. For a while, a few inmates listened. Then one of them found out what she had actually done. You falsely accused some kid? Hannah immediately started crying. He ruined my life. The woman stared at her. You ruined his first. After that, Hannah learned to keep quiet. Her days became painfully ordinary. Wake up, eat, work, return to her cell, sleep, repeat. Her scholarship was gone. Her university admission was gone. Her future career was gone. Even her family had stopped visiting. But the worst part wasn't prison. It was the internet. Someone had uploaded the recording of her laughing while planning Connor's downfall. It spread everywhere. Whenever Hannah's name was searched, that recording appeared. She had once dreamed of becoming famous. She had succeeded, just not in the way she wanted. One afternoon, a new inmate entered the laundry room. She glanced at Hannah. Hey, aren't you that girl from the news? Hannah's stomach dropped. I don't know what you're talking about. The woman smiled. You're the scholarship girl who faked an assault. Hannah's hands clenched around the wet cloth. Leave me alone. The woman laughed. Funny. You used to say that when people ask questions too. Hannah turned away. For the first time, there were no cameras, no reporters, no sympathetic audience, no one waiting to believe her tears. Only consequences. That evening, Hannah sat on her bunk and stared at the small photograph she'd managed to keep. It was a newspaper clipping from before everything collapsed. Her old picture was on the front page. Rural scholar rises against the odds. Hannah stared at it for a long time. Then she tore it in half. Then again. Then again. She whispered, I should have won. A voice from the other bunk answered. You did. Hannah looked over. The woman shrugged. You got exactly what you wanted. Hannah frowned. What? You wanted everyone to know your name. The woman smiled. Now they do. Hannah's face crumpled. She buried it in her hands. Meanwhile, across the country, Connor was preparing for his final year of university. His grades remained at the top of his class. His scholarship had been renewed. He had even received several offers from prestigious graduate programs. And every time someone asked him about the scandal, he simply said, "It happened. The truth came out. I'm moving on." He never mentioned Hannah again. That hurt her more than any headline, because Hannah had spent years dreaming about standing above everyone else. And now the person she had tried hardest to destroy was living the life she had wanted. One night, Hannah lay awake in her cell. She remembered the day she first saw Connor carrying books across campus. She remembered thinking he was perfect, smart, popular, respected, everything she wanted to become. Then she remembered the moment she decided that if she couldn't rise beside him, she would climb over him. She had thought she was clever. She had thought tears could control people. She had thought one accusation could destroy a life. She had been right about that last part. She had simply forgotten that lies could eventually turn around and destroy the person who told them. The lights flickered on. Web. Up. Hannah slowly sat up. Another day waited for her. She followed the guard down the corridor. Behind the prison walls, nobody cared about her sob story anymore. Nobody cared how poor she'd been. Nobody cared how ambitious she'd been. Nobody cared about the future she'd once imagined. She was simply Hannah Webb, convicted liar, false accuser, prisoner. And while she spent her mornings scrubbing floors and her nights staring at the ceiling, Connor was outside living the future she had once tried to steal. That was the punishment she hated most. He hadn't just survived her. He had forgotten her.